Coming live from the Tivoli Met Radio studio here on Auraria campus, this is All Sports with Gerardo. Thank you for listening to All Sports through Met Radio on mymetmedia.com, live every Thursday from 3:30 to 5 p.m. This is your host, Gerardo, and all I talk is sports. On the show today, I am going to talk about NFL football, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball, NHL hockey, college football, college basketball, and soccer. So before I start the show, I hope you all had a great week. To start off with Major League Baseball, Yasmani Grandal and the White Sox have agreed to a 4-year contract. Pitcher Will Smith and the Braves have agreed to a 3-year contract. Pitcher Chris Martin and the Braves have agreed to a 2-year contract. So here are the rest of the Major League Baseball awards that were won by individual players in both the American League and in the National League. The MVP award winners are Mike Trout and Cody Bellinger. Mike Trout won American League MVP and Cody Bellinger won National League MVP. Here are the Cy Young Award winners. Justin Verlander won American League Cy Young. Jacob deGrom won National League Cy Young. Jacob deGrom won back-to-back National League Cy Youngs in 2018 and in 2019. So congrats to Jacob deGrom on winning back-to-back Cy Young awards in the National League. And congrats to the winners that won MVP and that won the Cy Young in the American League and in the National League. Here is the list of every player that is on the 2020 Major League Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. Bobby Abreu, Josh Beckett, Heath Bell, Barry Bonds, Eric Chavez, Roger Clemens, Adam Dunn, Cone Figgins, Rafael Forsell, Jason Giambi, Todd Helton, Raul Ibanez, Derek Jeter, Andrew Jones, Jeff Kent, Paul Kearns, Cliff Lee, Carlos Pena, Brad Penny, Andy Pettitte, J.J. Pruce, Manny Ramirez, Brian Roberts, Scott Rowland, Kurt Schilling, Gary Sheffield, Alfonso Soriano, Sammy Sosa, Jose Valverde, Omar Vizquel, Billy Wagner, and Larry Walker. So looking at the names that are on the 2020 Major League Baseball Hall of Fame ballot, we definitely have some new names that are on this year's ballot. We got some first-time individual players that are eligible to get inducted into Cooperstown. We also have some familiar names that have been on the ballot for the last few years. So we're going to have to wait and see who gets into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame and who gets inducted into Cooperstown in 2020. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see who goes into Cooperstown. And there's definitely a few names that stand out on this list. And hopefully some of those individual players, whether it's their first time on the ballot or they've been on the ballot for the last few years, hopefully this year is the year that they finally get in to Cooperstown. Now there's definitely a few names that stand out, but there's only a few names that really stand out. For the first time, Derek Jeter is on the Hall of Fame ballot. There's no doubt that Derek Jeter is a first ballot Hall of Famer with the type of career that he had in Major League Baseball and with the Yankees. Now it's unknown how Derek Jeter's going to get into Cooperstown. Is it going to be like Mariano Rivera, where he's an anonymous vote? We're going to have to wait and see. Or is he going to get in like everybody else, where they get a certain amount of votes and they get inducted into Cooperstown. We're going to have to wait and see. But no matter how Derek Jeter gets into Cooperstown, there's no doubt that he's going to get into Cooperstown in 2020 and be a first ballot Hall of Famer. With the career that Derek Jeter had in Major League Baseball, but with the New York Yankees, there's no doubt that Derek Jeter was one of the best players to ever play in Major League Baseball, but especially for the Yankees. Now, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, they've been on the ballot for the last few years. Is 2020 the year they get inducted into Cooperstown? We're going to have to wait and see. But there's only a few more years left of Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens being eligible to get inducted into Cooperstown. 2020 is the final year Larry Walker will appear on the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. For the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, players are eligible to be on the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame ballot for 10 years. So you basically have 10 years to get inducted into Cooperstown. Now, to become a finalist and to be inducted into Cooperstown, it's a process and you need a certain amount of votes, but you also need a certain percentage to even be listed as a finalist. And then once you're listed as a finalist, then you have to be voted in. And you can't vote everybody into Cooperstown. So usually there's only a few players that are the lucky ones that get inducted into Cooperstown. Since this is Larry Walker's final year on the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame ballot, we're going to have to wait and see if 2020 is the year he gets inducted into Cooperstown. It's unknown if he will or if he won't get inducted into Cooperstown. We're just going to have to wait and see. But this is the final year for Larry Walker on the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. And Major League Baseball only gives players 10 years for their chance to get inducted into Cooperstown. And if they can't make it in those 10 years, then unfortunately you're not going to make it into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame and be inducted into Cooperstown. For the last few years, Larry Walker has been trying to get into Cooperstown, but especially just recently in the last few years, he's been close. He's been getting a higher percentage of the amount of votes that he needs to get inducted into Cooperstown. Now in 2020, if he can increase that percentage, then there will be a greater chance of Larry Walker getting inducted into Cooperstown in 2020. We're just going to have to wait and see if 2020 is Larry Walker's year, and if not, unfortunately Larry Walker will not make it into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. Now for Todd Helton, he has appeared back on the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. We're also going to have to wait and see if 2020 is the year Todd Helton gets inducted into Cooperstown, or if he's ever going to get inducted into Cooperstown. But whether Larry Walker and Todd Helton, or if it's just Larry Walker or Todd Helton, get inducted into Cooperstown, whichever player is first, or whichever player is first on making it in to Cooperstown, and they were a former player for the Rockies, that will be the first player in Rockies franchise history that has been inducted into Cooperstown. So we're going to have to wait and see if that's Larry Walker, Todd Helton, or another player going into the future. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about the NFL. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to NFL football. Matt Ryan moved into 10 in all-time career passing yards. Christian McCaffrey passed Hall of Famer LaDainian Tomlinson for the most receptions by a running back in their first 3 seasons. Christian McCaffrey joins Herschel Walker as the only players in NFL history with 2,500 plus rushing yards and 2,000 plus receiving yards in their first 3 seasons. Christian McCaffrey is the first player in NFL history to rush for at least 1,000 yards and have at least 500 receiving yards in his first 10 games of the regular season. Adam Vinatieri has the most field goal attempts. DeAndre Hopkins becomes the second youngest player to reach 600 receptions. Jarvis Landry has the most receptions during a player's first 6 seasons in NFL history. Patrick Mahomes has 68 passing touchdowns and 8,007 passing yards, which is the most in 25 career games in the NFL. Lamar Jackson has 1,483 career rushing yards, and he passed Cam Newton for the most rushing yards by a quarterback in his first 2 seasons in NFL history. In Lamar Jackson's first 16 career starts, he has 13 wins, 1,258 rushing yards, and he is now the front runner for NFL MVP. Deshaun Watson has 74 offensive touchdowns in his first 32 career starts, which is the most touchdowns in the Super Bowl era. Dak Prescott is the first player in Cowboys history to pass for 3,000 plus yards in the first 10 games of the regular season. Michael Thomas is the first player in NFL history to record 90 plus receptions in each of his first 4 seasons in the NFL. Michael Thomas is the first player in NFL history to record 90 plus receptions in the first 10 games of the regular season. Since 2012, Russell Wilson has 32 career game-winning drives, which is the most game-winning drives in the NFL. Since 2016, Chandler Jones has the most sacks in the NFL. Last week, before the Browns beat the Steelers 21-7 on Thursday Night Football, before the Browns-Steelers game ended, Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph got into an altercation down by the end zone in the last few seconds of the game. Myles Garrett has been suspended for the rest of the regular season and postseason. This week, Myles Garrett tried to appeal his suspension, but the suspension was upheld, and he is going to have to serve the suspension the NFL handed out to him this past week. And this is only the minimum. Who knows if this suspension is going to increase or last longer, but so far, this suspension is for the rest of the regular season and postseason. Browns defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi has been suspended 1 game. Steelers center Maurkice Pouncey has been suspended 2 games. Also this week, Maurkice Pouncey appealed his suspension. Originally, he was suspended 3 games, and this week, the NFL announced that they took his suspension down to 2 games, so now Maurkice Pouncey will serve a 2-game suspension. The Browns and the Steelers were both fined $250,000. So looking at this altercation between Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph, The Browns and the Steelers is a rivalry game. They're both in the AFC North, and this is always a divisional matchup. Both the Browns and the Steelers go up against each other twice a year since they're in the same division. As we all know, no matter if it's the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball, NHL hockey, or whatever sport it is, there's always teams that have a rivalry, especially if they're in the same division, like the Browns and the Steelers. So just like the Broncos have a rivalry with the Raiders, the Chargers, and the Chiefs, since they're all in the AFC West, the Browns and the Steelers have a rivalry against each other since they're in the AFC North. Now towards the end of this Browns-Steelers game, the highlight of this game wasn't that the Browns finally won a game, and it was a primetime game. And now the Browns have won a game, and they haven't won a game in the last few weeks. What was the headline of this Browns-Steelers game was the altercation between Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph. Myles Garrett is one of the best defensive players in the NFL, and this is only the beginning of his career. Myles Garrett is also one of the best defensive players on the Browns. Now, Mason Rudolph is a backup quarterback for the Steelers, and since Ben Roethlisberger is out for the rest of the season with an injury, Mason Rudolph had to replace Ben Roethlisberger. So right now, Mason Rudolph is the backup quarterback and the quarterback for the Steelers right now. Now, this would have been a completely different story if this altercation would have been Myles Garrett and Ben Roethlisberger. I'm glad that it wasn't Ben Roethlisberger. Could have been a lot worse, and it would have been a completely different story if it would have been Ben Roethlisberger. Whether it's Ben Roethlisberger, Mason Rudolph, or whoever it is, this was not a great altercation between Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph. Now that this Browns-Steelers game has passed, and the NFL has done their investigation, and both sides have attorneys involved, both teams are involved, Myles Garrett stated that this altercation started because Mason Rudolph stated a racial slur towards him. Mason Rudolph and the Steelers declined to comment on that, and they also deny that that's not true. Both Mason Rudolph and his representatives have stated that that's not true, and that's a false statement by Myles Garrett. Whether it's true or not true, what Myles Garrett did to Mason Rudolph, this shouldn't happen to any player in the NFL or in sports, no matter if they're a quarterback, they're an offensive player, or a defensive player. This was a really bad altercation, and it could have been a lot worse than what it was. Now, anyone that was watching the Browns-Steelers game, especially towards the end of the game, saw this altercation. Now, if you didn't get to see this altercation live during the game, I highly recommend that you at least go to YouTube and see this altercation in the video of this altercation between Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph. Now, if you didn't get to watch the game live, but you're able to at least watch the highlights on ESPN or on another news channel, then you were able to see this altercation between Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, or you haven't seen the highlights of this Browns-Steelers game, or this altercation between Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph during the Browns-Steelers game, whether you were not watching the game live or you didn't see the highlights of the game on ESPN or on the news, or you haven't even seen the footage of this altercation between Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph on YouTube or on the internet, I highly recommend that you watch it if you haven't watched it. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, towards the end of the Browns-Steelers game, there was an altercation between Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph, and basically they both started fighting, and it escalated to a level that it shouldn't have escalated. And Myles Garrett landed up ripping off the helmet off of Mason Rudolph. And he landed up grabbing that helmet and hitting Mason Rudolph in the head with the helmet. Now, this altercation between Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph shouldn't have escalated to the level that it did. And this was a really bad altercation between Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph, especially with Myles Garrett grabbing the helmet and hitting Mason Rudolph in the head, probably as hard as he could with the helmet. He could have seriously injured Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph could have went to the hospital with a serious head injury. That could have been a career-ending injury. It also could have been a life-threatening injury. So it was really bad that this altercation escalated to that level. There's always altercations between individual players in certain teams when it's a rivalry or it's teams in the same division. No matter if it's the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball, NHL hockey, or whatever sport it is, you're always going to have players that fight against each other, especially when they're on the opposite team. But for this altercation to escalate to the level that it did, that should not have happened. It's unacceptable. Now, Myles Garrett has been suspended for the rest of the season because of this altercation. Now, Mason Rudolph hasn't been suspended or fined for this altercation. So we're going to have to wait and see if Mason Rudolph has to face any consequences. But if Myles Garrett has to face consequences, Mason Rudolph should have to face consequences. And even for the players that got involved to try to separate Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph from each other, and they're facing consequences, why should everybody else but Mason Rudolph face consequences? So as the NFL does their investigation, especially on Mason Rudolph and on this altercation between Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph, we're going to have to wait and see if any other information gets released in the next week and in the coming weeks, and if Mason Rudolph will face any consequences for his actions in this altercation between him and Myles Garrett. But hopefully going into the future, we won't see an altercation between individual players or teams, no matter if it's the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball, NHL hockey, or whatever sport it is, escalate to the level that this altercation did between Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph. That was totally unacceptable. Former Browns wide receiver Antonio Callaway has been suspended for the next 10 games for violating the NFL's substance abuse policy. The Dolphins released running back Mark Walton after he was arrested and charged with aggravated battery of a pregnant woman. Wide receiver Allen Hurts and the Dolphins have agreed to a 2-year contract extension. The last time Colin Kaepernick played in the NFL was back in 2016. Last weekend, the NFL arranged a private workout for Colin Kaepernick in Atlanta, Georgia. All 32 teams were invited to attend the workout. 8 teams attended the workout that included the Chiefs, Jets, Eagles, Titans, 49ers, Redskins, and Lions. After the workout, the video of the workout and the interview was sent to all 32 teams. The workout was relocated from the Falcons training camp facility to a local high school in the Atlanta area. So originally, 25 teams were going to attend the workout before the workout was relocated. Since the workout was relocated from the Falcons training camp facility to a local high school, which was about an hour south in the Atlanta area from the Falcons training facility, not all 25 teams that were expected to attend the workout were able to attend, since this was a last-minute decision to relocate Colin Kaepernick's workout. So only 8 teams were able to attend Colin Kaepernick's workout. So Colin Kaepernick was able to film his workout and do his workout at a local high school in the Atlanta area. And after the workout, Colin Kaepernick did an interview with the media, and he stated that he's ready to return back to the NFL and he's ready to play football. Now the ball's in Roger Goodell's hand and in the NFL's hand, which includes all 32 teams and all 32 NFL owners and general managers. So Colin Kaepernick said he's ready to return back to the NFL, even though he hasn't played in the NFL since 2016. And after the type of workout that Colin Kaepernick had this past weekend in Atlanta, he definitely looks like he's capable to return back to the NFL, whether it's this season or next season. He ran some really good plays, and he was able to throw the football. He was able to make some good passes, whether they were short passes or long passes, and he can definitely still throw the football and run plays as a quarterback. So now we're going to have to wait and see, going into the next few weeks, towards the end of this season, or going into 2020, if Colin Kaepernick gets signed to an NFL team. It's a 50-50 chance, and we're going to have to wait and see. Colin Kaepernick said he's ready. After viewing the footage from Colin Kaepernick's workout this past weekend in Atlanta, it definitely looks like Colin Kaepernick could play in the NFL and be a quarterback for an NFL team. Now we're going to have to wait and see if an NFL team is going to give Colin Kaepernick a chance to be their quarterback, whether it's this season or next season. The NFL midseason awards would go to Nick Bosa, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Josh Jacobs, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Kyle Shanahan, Coach of the Year, Christian McCaffrey, Offensive Player of the Year, Stephen Gilmore, Defensive Player of the Year, and MVP Russell Wilson. It's pretty likely that these individual players I just listed will win these awards in the NFL. The one that I could possibly see change is MVP. It's likely going to be between Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson, but both Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson have a strong case as to why they should win NFL MVP. Both Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson are front runners to win NFL MVP. So we're going to have to wait and see, once the NFL season's over, which players win what awards in the NFL. Andy Janovich suffered a dislocated elbow during the Broncos-Vikings game, and he is out for the rest of the season. The Broncos lost to the Vikings 23-27 on Sunday, November 17th. Now, looking at this Broncos-Vikings game, there's no doubt that the Broncos should have won this game, especially winning 20-0 at halftime. Now, in the first half, the Broncos showed up, and they were playing some great football, both on offense and defense. They were able to score points, and they were able to stop the Vikings from scoring points. Now, for the Vikings, with the Vikings being one of the best teams in the NFC and having one of the best home records, this was shocking for the Vikings that they didn't score a single point in the first half of this game or play the way that they're capable of on the offensive and defensive side of the football. Now at halftime, something definitely changed, both for the Broncos and for the Vikings. Now the Vikings coaches probably had a long talk with the Vikings team as to why are you playing the way you are and why are you not scoring points. And in the second half, that definitely turned around and changed. The Vikings were able to come out and play the way that they're capable of. During the second half, they scored 27 unanswered points. The Broncos were not able to score any points except for a field goal, and they basically let that 20-0 lead slip from their hands. And by the time we were coming past the halfway point of the fourth quarter, the Vikings were only down a few points. And in the last few minutes of the game, the Vikings were able to come back and take the lead from the Broncos. And unfortunately, the Broncos lost a close game that they should have won, 23-27. And the Vikings were able to come back and upset the Broncos and beat the Broncos in Minneapolis. But this was definitely a game that the Broncos should have won, especially the way they played in the first half. I don't know what happened in the second half. They just got too confident that they were going to win this game, and they stopped playing on that offensive and defensive side. And the Vikings took advantage of that, and they came back and they were able to beat the Broncos in this game. This would have been a great game for the Broncos to win, especially being up in Minneapolis and the Vikings having one of the best home records and being one of the best teams in the NFC. But unfortunately, the Broncos were not able to hold on to this game. So hopefully in the next game, the Broncos can hold on and win the game, whether it's on the road or here in Denver. But looking at the Broncos-Vikings game, Brandon Allen had a great game. It's just the Broncos were not able to hold on and win this game, and he wasn't able to score any touchdowns in the second half of the game. But in the first half of the game, he definitely had a great game. Courtland Sutton and Noah Fant definitely had a great game, just like they did in the Browns game. Now for Noah Fant, he's going to be a great tight end. This is only his rookie season, and this is only the beginning of Noah Fant. But if he can become a better blocker, he's going to be a great tight end. Garrett Bowles, it's just another week and another game that Garrett Bowles is one of the highlights of the Broncos game. Man, did the Broncos need to pull out Garrett Bowles and insert someone else at left tackle. But the Broncos really don't have any better options at the left tackle position, and the players that they do have are injured. So unfortunately, Garrett Bowles has to stay in for all the Broncos games, But every good play that the Broncos have, it always never goes through. And the Broncos always have to redo the play, or they lose those yards or that play because of Garrett Bowles. For all those holding penalties and all those penalties that Garrett Bowles gets throughout every Broncos game, this season, last season, or whenever it is, Garrett Bowles always messes up all those great plays for the Broncos on the offense. So hopefully this offseason, the Broncos can find a better option at left tackle, and they definitely need to replace Garrett Bowles. But for now, Garrett Bowles has to remain in there. But whenever the Broncos have a chance for a new player or a replacement for Garrett Bowles, they need to pull Garrett Bowles out of the game. Alexander Johnson is definitely a player that you need to keep an eye on, especially on that defensive side. He's been one of the best defensive players and one of the best linebackers for the Broncos this season. And he has definitely been one of the highlights on the defensive side for the Broncos this season. And if you don't know who Alexander Johnson is, you need to keep an eye on him. He's definitely having a great season, and he's definitely a great defensive player. Alexander Johnson can make the plays, and he can also stop players from gaining yards. But when the Broncos need a defensive play, Alexander Johnson has been there to make that play. So Alexander Johnson just needs to keep playing the way he has. But he's definitely a great defensive player. Shelby Harris had a great game against the Vikings, and he had a few sacks. So Shelby Harris needs to keep playing the way he's been playing, especially the way he played against the Vikings. Now looking at the Vikings, especially that Vikings offense, they weren't able to do nothing in the first half. And the Broncos were able to contain Kirk Cousins, Stephon Diggs, and Dalvin Cook especially. And the Broncos were able to contain Dalvin Cook from having a big game. Now the Vikings landed up winning this game somehow because they played great in the second half. But the Broncos were able to contain Dalvin Cook from having a lot of yards and having a big game against the Broncos. If Dalvin Cook would have had a big game against the Broncos like he has against other teams this season, there's no doubt the Broncos would have not won this game against the Vikings. But if you take a look at the Vikings, they didn't play that great in the first half, but in the second half, they definitely turned it around. In the first half, the Vikings offense couldn't score points, and the Vikings defense couldn't stop the Broncos. But in the second half, that Vikings offense and defense showed up. And that Vikings offense played the way they've been playing for most of the season. And that defense also played the way they've been playing this season. The Broncos go against the Bills on Sunday, November 24th. Now, if the Broncos want to beat the Bills, especially up in Buffalo, Brandon Allen's going to have a great game. We're going to need Phillip Lindsay, Cortland Sutton, and Noah Fant to show up on that offensive side. And they're going to have a big game and help Brandon Allen on the offensive side if the Broncos want to have a chance at beating the Bills. The Broncos defense has to show up and play some great defense against the Bills. Alexander Johnson just needs to keep playing the way he's been playing. Now looking at the Bills, last week they did play the Dolphins, which is one of the worst teams in the NFL. But Josh Allen was named AFC Offensive Player of the Week. Josh Allen is a young, talented quarterback. So you don't want to underestimate Josh Allen. Because when you do, that's when he has a big game against your team. And there's no doubt that Josh Allen is a young, talented quarterback, and it's only the beginning of his career. But Josh Allen is a great quarterback, and he's going to be a great quarterback for the Bills going into the future. So if the Broncos want to have any chance of winning this game against the Bills, especially up in Buffalo, they're going to have to stop Josh Allen and that Bills offense from scoring a lot of points. But they're also going to have to score points on offense. They're going to have to score some touchdowns if they want to have a chance at beating the Bills. Now, it doesn't matter how good the Bills are, whether they're a good team or a bad team. But when you play the Bills in Buffalo, I don't care how good the Bills are, they play their best football in Buffalo. So the Broncos need to show up and play some football. And if they don't, the Bills will beat the Broncos in Buffalo. And the Bills have also been on a winning streak. And they've been playing some of their best football this season compared to the type of football they've been playing in the last few seasons. And when the Bills are in Buffalo, they're very tough to beat. So the Broncos are going to have to show up and play football if they want to have a chance at beating the Bills. This is the 12th week of regular season football. So right now I'm going to update you with the Week 11 final scores, and I'm also going to tell you the Week 12 schedule and the games to keep an eye on this week in football. So to start off, looking at Week 11, here are the final scores and highlights from this week of NFL football. The Browns beat the Steelers 21-7 on Thursday Night Football. The Cowboys beat the Lions 35-27. The Colts beat the Jaguars 33-13. The Ravens beat the Texans 41-7. The Vikings beat the Broncos 27-23. The Saints beat the Buccaneers 34-17. The 49ers beat the Cardinals 36-26. The Raiders beat the Bengals 17-10. The Patriots beat the Eagles 17-10. The Rams beat the Bears 17-7 on Sunday Night Football, and the Chiefs beat the Chargers 24-17 on Monday Night Football. Now looking at Week 12, here are the Week 12 matchups to keep an eye on this week in NFL football. The Colts versus the Texans on Thursday Night Football. The Broncos versus the Bills. The Buccaneers versus the Falcons. The Panthers versus the Saints. The Seahawks versus the Eagles. The Cowboys versus the Patriots. The Packers versus the 49ers on Sunday Night Football. And the Ravens versus the Rams on Monday Night Football. So that's the Week 11 final scores and the Week 12 schedule for the NFL. So right now I'm going to update you with the current division standings in the AFC and NFC. To start off in the AFC, in the AFC East, right now the Patriots are leading this division at 9 games, and the next closest team is the Bills at 7 games. In the AFC North, right now the Ravens are leading this division at 8 games, and the next closest team is the Steelers at 5 games. In the AFC South, right now the Colts and the Texans are tied for this division at 6 games, and the next closest team is the Titans at 5 games. And in the AFC West, right now the Chiefs are leading this division at 7 games, and the next closest team is the Raiders at 6 games. In the NFC East, right now the Cowboys are leading this division at 6 games, and the next closest team is the Eagles at 5 games. In the NFC North, right now the Packers and the Vikings are tied for this division at 8 games, and the next closest team is the Bears at 4 games. In the NFC South, right now the Saints are leading this division at 8 games, and the next closest team is the Panthers at 5 games. And in the NFC West, right now the 49ers are leading this division at 9 games, and the next closest team is the Seahawks at 8 games. So that's the current division standings in the AFC and NFC. In the Week 12 NFL Power Rankings, the current top 10 NFL football teams are the Patriots, Ravens, 49ers, Seahawks, Packers, Saints, Vikings, Chiefs, Cowboys, and Texans. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about the NBA and NHL. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to NBA basketball. LeBron James is now the first player in NBA history with a triple-double against 30 different teams. Luka Doncic has the most triple-doubles before turning 21 years old. D'Angelo Russell is out for the next 2 weeks with a sprained right thumb. The Trailblazers waived Pau Gasol. The Trailblazers signed Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony will wear the number 00. So it's great to see Carmelo Anthony back in the NBA. And Carmelo Anthony definitely wants to play in the NBA. And he wants to play a few more seasons in the NBA. The Trailblazers are happy that they signed Carmelo Anthony to the team, and they're looking forward to Carmelo Anthony being a part of the Trailblazers and helping Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum and the rest of the Trailblazers this season. And they're hoping that the Trailblazers have the potential of having a winning season and turning their season around now that Carmelo Anthony's on the team, and the Trailblazers want to get back into the playoffs this season and have a great season in the NBA. So it's great to see Carmelo Anthony back in the NBA. And the NBA and other individual players in the NBA are happy to see Carmelo Anthony back in the NBA. And Carmelo Anthony is definitely looking forward to this next chapter of his NBA career with the Trailblazers now. So we're going to have to wait and see how Carmelo Anthony plays for the Trailblazers in the next few games and for the rest of the season with the Trailblazers. So right now I'm going to update you of the current Nuggets schedule. I'm going to tell you every team they went up against this past week and the final scores of those games. And I'm also going to tell you who the Nuggets go against in the next week. So to start off last week, the Nuggets went against the Nets. And the Nuggets beat the Nets 101-93. The Nuggets went against the Grizzlies. And the Nuggets beat the Grizzlies 131-114. And the Nuggets went against the Rockets. And the Nuggets beat the Rockets 105-95. This week, the Nuggets continue their homestand for the next week. And they go against the Celtics, the Suns, and the Wizards. So that's the current schedule for the Nuggets, for the teams they went against this past week, and the final scores of those games, and also the teams the Nuggets go against in the next week. In the Week 5 NBA Power Rankings, the current top 10 NBA basketball teams are the Lakers, Celtics, Rockets, Bucks, Clippers, Jazz, Nuggets, Heat, Raptors, and 76ers. Moving on now to NHL hockey. So right now I'm going to update you with the current schedule for the Avalanche. I'm going to tell you the teams they went up against this past week and the final scores of those games. And I'm also going to tell you the teams the Avalanche go up against in the next week. So to start off, last week, the Avalanche went against the Oilers. And the Avalanche lost to the Oilers 2-6. The Avalanche went against the Canucks. And the Avalanche were able to win a close game against the Canucks in overtime 5-4. And the Avalanche went against the Flames. And the Avalanche were able to win a close game against the Flames 3-2. This week, the Avalanche go against the Wild, the Maple Leafs, and the Oilers. So that's the current schedule for the Avalanche, for the teams they went up against this past week, and the final scores of those games, and also the teams the Avalanche go up against in the next week. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about college football, college basketball, and soccer. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to college football. Alabama quarterback Tua Tagovailoa is out for the rest of the season with a dislocated hip with a posterior wall fracture. Tua Tagovailoa had a successful surgery on his right hip, and he is expected to make a full recovery. So we're going to have to wait and see if Tua Tagovailoa returns back to Alabama next season, or if he declares for the NFL draft next year. No matter if Tua Tagovailoa returns back to Alabama next season or he declares for the NFL draft, with this injury that Tua Tagovailoa has suffered, this is definitely going to impact him on where he's going to be drafted in the NFL draft if he happens to declare for the 2020 NFL draft. We're going to have to wait and see if Tua Tagovailoa would still be a first-round pick, or is he going to drop to the second round of the NFL draft. If he didn't get this injury, and if he didn't have to sit out the rest of the season, Tua Tagovailoa definitely would have been a first-round pick, and even a first-round pick in the top 10 of the NFL draft. But with this injury that Tua Tagovailoa suffered, this could definitely impact him in the NFL draft if he declares for the 2020 NFL draft. But with Tua Tagovailoa not being able to play for Alabama for the rest of this season, and who knows if he's going to return back to Alabama next season, this is definitely going to impact Alabama since he was the best quarterback on the Alabama roster. So we're going to have to wait and see who's the quarterback for Alabama now that Tua Tagovailoa is out for the rest of the season. But with Tua Tagovailoa being out for the rest of the season, is this going to impact Alabama from making it into the college football playoff top 25 and being in the college football playoff top 4? We're going to have to wait and see. But now, with Tua Tagovailoa out, and even before Tua Tagovailoa suffered this season-ending injury, Alabama has fallen in the top 25 of the college football playoff rankings. And now, Alabama is not a top 4 college football playoff team. Currently, Alabama is ranked number 5. So we're going to have to wait and see. Can Alabama get back into the top 4? Or are they not going to be in the top 4? Or are they going to continue to fall in the top 25? We're going to have to wait and see. But with Alabama having a different quarterback now, is Alabama's season going to be over? Are they not going to get into the college football playoff top 4 or top 25? We're going to have to wait and see what type of football Alabama plays for the rest of the season. But so far, it's been a different season for Alabama this season. Oklahoma quarterback Jalen Hurts led number 8 Oklahoma to the largest comeback in school history after coming back from being down 28-3 against number 13 Baylor, and number 8 Oklahoma beat number 13 Baylor 34-31. Air Force beat Colorado State 38-21 on Saturday, November 16th up in Fort Collins, Colorado. Colorado goes against Washington on Saturday, November 23rd up in Boulder, Colorado. Colorado State goes against Wyoming on Friday, November 22nd. The top 25 college football teams are number 1 LSU, number 2 Ohio State, number 3 Clemson, number 4 Georgia, number 5 Alabama, number 6 Oregon, number 7 Utah, number 8 Penn State, number 9 Oklahoma, number 10 Minnesota, number 11 Florida, number 12 Wisconsin, number 13 Michigan, number 14 Baylor, number 15 Auburn, number 16 Notre Dame, number 17 Iowa, number 18 Memphis, number 19 Cincinnati, number 20 Boise State, number 21 Oklahoma State, number 22 Iowa State, number 23 Southern California, number 24 Appalachian State, and number 25 SMU. The top 4 college football teams are number 1 LSU, number 2 Ohio State, number 3 Clemson, and number 4 Georgia. The race for the Heisman Trophy includes Joe Burrow from LSU, Jalen Hurts from Oklahoma, and Justin Fields from Ohio State. This is the 13th week of college football. So right now I'm going to update you with the Week 12 college football final scores, and I'm also going to tell you the Week 13 college football schedule and the games to keep an eye on this week in college football. So to start off, here are the Week 12 final scores and highlights from this week of college football. Number 4 Georgia beat number 16 Auburn 21-14. Number 19 Iowa beat number 11 Minnesota 23-19, and number 8 Oklahoma beat number 13 Baylor 34-31. Now looking at Week 13, here are the Week 13 matchups to keep an eye on this week in college football. Number 9 Penn State versus number 2 Ohio State, and number 24 Texas A&M versus number 4 Georgia. So that's the Week 12 final scores and the Week 13 schedule for college football. In the Week 11 college football AP Top 10 poll, the current top 10 college football teams are LSU, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Penn State, Georgia, Oregon, Utah, Oklahoma, and Florida. Moving on now to college basketball. In the Week 1 college basketball AP Top 10 poll, the current top 10 college basketball teams are Duke, Louisville, Michigan State, Kansas, North Carolina, Maryland, Virginia, Gonzaga, Kentucky, and Ohio State. Moving on now to soccer, the Seattle Sounders are the 2019 Major League Soccer Cup champions. Right now I'm going to take a commercial break. When I come back, I will talk about the end of the show. Welcome back to All Sports with Gerardo. Moving on now to end the show. What to watch for this week in sports. The Broncos go against the Bills on Sunday, November 24th. The Broncos, the 12th week of NFL regular season football. NFL football, Colorado goes against Washington on Saturday, November 23rd up in Boulder, Colorado. Colorado State goes against Wyoming on Friday, November 22nd. CU Buffaloes, CSU Rams, the 13th week of college football, college basketball, the Nuggets, NBA basketball, the Avalanche, NHL hockey. Moving on now on the next show, I will talk about NFL football, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball, NHL hockey, college football, and college basketball. I hope you all have a great weekend. Tune in to the next All Sports with Gerardo show next Thursday from 3:30 to 5 p.m. I want to say thank you to everybody that listens to All Sports through Met Radio here on MyMetMedia.com. subscribe or like my pages on social media at AllSportsWithGerardo. Until next time, this is Gerardo.